every single smile you trust is probably a loaded gun pointed back at your own naivete. We live in a world saturated with the ritual performance of happiness, where emotional bankruptcy is dressed up in high-gloss veneers and the required social uniform demands a constant, radiant facade. You are right now swimming in an ocean of manufactured joy. Scroll through any feed, attend any mandatory corporate gathering, listen to the forced optimism of any stranger on the street, and you quickly realize that the contemporary human experience is defined not by genuine contentment, but by the strenuous effort to convince others and perhaps ourselves that we are fine. But here is the brutal, simple truth. Most of the happiness you witness is a lie, a carefully constructed piece of psychological armor, and the mechanics of spotting that lie are embarrassingly simple, hidden in plain sight, codified by a forgotten French neurologist over a century ago. This knowledge is dangerous because once you learn to recognize the signature of authentic joy, you will realize how rare it truly is, and you will never again look at another human face the same way. The key to unlocking this uncomfortable secret is known as the Duchenne smile. Named after Guillaume Duchenne de Boulogne, a man obsessed with mapping the landscape of human facial expressions using electrical stimulation, it is the only reliable biometric signature of genuine, uninhibited pleasure. Duchenne spent years applying electrodes to the faces of psychiatric patients and executed prisoners, carefully cataloging which muscles produced which emotional effect. What he discovered was a fundamental divide in human expression. The voluntary smile, which serves social lubrication and compliance, and the involuntary smile, which signals an actual surge of positive emotion stemming from the brain's limbic system. The common social smile, the one deployed for cameras, bosses, and awkward first dates, is generated primarily by the zygomatic major muscle, which pulls the corners of the mouth upwards. It is easy to fake, easy to sustain, and fundamentally meaningless. It is theater. The Duchenne smile, however, requires a specific secondary muscle group, the orbicularis oculi. This is the muscle that surrounds the eye, specifically the outer portion, which when genuinely engaged, produces those small creases, the tiny wrinkles we often dismiss as crow's feet. The crucial, profound insight Duchenne gave us is this. While you can consciously lift the corners of your mouth, you can command the zygomatic major, you cannot, through sheer willpower, consciously contract the outer ring of the orbicularis oculi with any degree of authenticity. This muscle is controlled by a deeper, older part of the brain that bypasses the cortical pathways responsible for deliberate action. It is the body's involuntary check on the ego's performance. A truly happy person smiles with their eyes. A performing person smiles only with their mouth. To spot the fake smile, therefore, requires you to ignore the main event, the mouth, and focus your analytical gaze on the periphery. If the eyes remain static, dead, or merely vacant while the lips curve into that familiar saccharine arc, you are watching a lie unfold in real time. You are witnessing an act of psychological compliance, a mask being applied. This is the power of observation, the necessary cynicism required to navigate a world obsessed with surface-level validation. If you are tired of the shallow answers, if you recognize the decay in modern discourse and want to understand the deep subconscious truths that govern human deception, then you owe it to your own intellectual honesty to stop missing the critical insights. Hit that subscribe button now. Because the true tragedy is not just that people lie with their smiles, but that society has become so fundamentally inhospitable to genuine feeling that we are forced to default to the performance. The social contract now demands that we shield others from our genuine despair, our exhaustion, or our confusion, lest we become inconvenient. The obligatory smile is not a sign of warmth. It is a declaration of emotional surrender. We have forgotten what real joy looks like because we see so little of it. We are so adept at faking it that our baseline recognition of happy has been recalibrated downward to include the voluntary, non-Duchenne performance. Think about the implications of this constant performance. The need to maintain the superficial smile, the non-Duchenne fraud, creates a continuous low-level cognitive dissonance. You are presenting one reality while experiencing another, and the brain registers this friction. This gap between performance and reality is the petri dish where anxiety thrives. We are not just lying to others, we are subjecting ourselves to endless self-betrayal, forcing the biological body to send signals that the emotional system does not endorse. The Duchenne smile is not merely a scientific observation. It is a devastating diagnostic tool for the soul of a civilization that prizes appearance over authenticity. The ability to spot its absence is not a cynical superpower. It is a necessary defense mechanism against the insidious, corrosive effect of perpetual fakery. Every time you engage with a politician, a celebrity, a salesperson, or even a friend who offers that wide, toothy, but eye-dead grin, you are being offered a piece of psychological currency that is worthless. The awareness of the Duchenne mechanism forces a chilling realization. The people who claim to be the happiest, the performers, the self-help gurus, the relentlessly positive, are often the most proficient manipulators of their own zygomatic major muscle, and their persistent refusal to engage the orbicularis oculi is the silent confession of their emptiness. True contentment does not need marketing, it simply spills over, an uncontrollable leak from the deeper chambers of the self. The moment someone has to exert conscious control over their expression, they reveal that the feeling is either manufactured for external gain, or that the underlying psychological state is one of profound calculation, not spontaneous joy. This is why children are often the only people left who truly know how to smile. They have not yet learned the necessary deceit required to navigate the political landscape of adult life. This political landscape of adult interaction, demanding constant positive presentation, is why the maintenance of the fake smile becomes a psychological liability. The suffering originates not just in the lie itself, but in the monstrous caloric expenditure required to suppress the truth. We are told implicitly and explicitly that our authentic, messy, complex interior is unsuitable for public consumption. Sadness, doubt, and complexity are treated less like natural human states and more like contagious diseases that must be immediately quarantined or sanitized with a flood of forced optimism. This perpetual emotional lockdown creates a deep schism between the observing self and the performing self. The true psychological toll is paid in the currency of attentional energy. Every second spent monitoring the corners of your mouth, every moment spent curating the tone of your voice to ensure it reflects the expected emotional bandwidth, is a moment stolen from genuine thought, creativity, or connection. We are fundamentally exhausted, not by work or physical exertion, but by the relentless 24/7 internal auditing required to keep the mask perfectly affixed. This is the definition of deep existential fatigue, the feeling of being constantly on trial for the crime of being imperfectly human. The terrifying irony is that we believe this performance protects us. We mistake visibility for vulnerability, assuming that if the world sees our genuine hurt or frustration, it will punish us, humiliate us, or abandon us. So we build a titanium shell of superficial pleasantness, only to discover that the shell has turned into a prison, trapping the authentic self in a suffocating cage of its own making. It becomes clear then that the battle is not against external judgment, but against the internalized tyranny of expectations. If you are tired of merely navigating the surface-level lies of modern interaction, and want to consistently peel back these layers of manufactured truth, then this is the moment to stop scrolling for a second and hit that subscribe button, so you never miss the deep, uncomfortable insights that challenge the accepted narrative. We suffer because we have been conditioned to believe that emotional transparency is a weakness that will inevitably be exploited, leading us to preemptively exploit and betray ourselves first by silencing our own experience. We are victims of a deeply embedded cultural lie that self-control means self-erasure. This dynamic manifests in the bizarre modern anxiety where we constantly yearn for intimacy while simultaneously perfecting the defense mechanisms that make true connection impossible. We crave the deep comfort of being fully known, yet we have spent decades meticulously constructing a facade that ensures we are forever unknowable, even to ourselves. We mistake projection for presence. Our relationships become transactions built on the exchange of carefully managed personas, rather than the chaotic, messy, but ultimately rewarding interaction of two honest souls. This performance doesn't just damage the individual's psyche, it fundamentally poisons the social environment, creating a toxic feedback loop where everyone assumes everyone else is happy, successful, and flawless, which only increases the pressure on the individual to fake it harder. The consequence is the pervasive silent isolation that characterizes the contemporary moment. Millions of people standing shoulder to shoulder, flawlessly performing happiness, each secretly convinced they are the only fraud in the room. This phenomenon is why the simple act of genuine shared sadness can feel so explosively liberating. When two people drop their Duchenne-less guard and simply acknowledge the difficulty of existence, the resulting honesty is a shock of oxygen to a system starved by fakery. It confirms that the greatest act of rebellion in a society built on manufactured joy is the radical, terrifying choice to simply be miserable when you are miserable, to be uncertain when you are uncertain, and to finally allow the truth of the emotional landscape to be acknowledged, thereby collapsing the entire architecture of self-betrayal. This phenomenon is why the simple act of genuine shared sadness can feel so explosively liberating. When two people drop their Duchenne-less guard and simply acknowledge the difficulty of existence, the resulting honesty is a shock of oxygen to a system starved by fakery. It confirms that the greatest act of rebellion in a society built on manufactured joy is the radical, terrifying choice to simply be miserable when you are miserable, to be uncertain when you are uncertain, and to finally allow the truth of the emotional landscape to be acknowledged, thereby collapsing the entire architecture of self-betrayal. But where does this architecture find its most aggressive, most insidious, most lucrative expression? It is in the arena of manufactured digital presence. The creator economy, the influencer sphere, the entire sprawling ecosystem that monetizes the myth of authenticity. Here, the performance is not merely a defense mechanism, it is the product itself, and the stakes for deviation are existential. We watch millions of people ostensibly sharing their deepest truths and chronicling their journeys, yet what we are witnessing is the cold transaction of carefully managed vulnerability. They have taken the raw, chaotic material of human existence, their breakfast, their breakdowns, their medical issues, their partners, and meticulously molded it into an optimized, consumable narrative. This is not transparency. This is the weaponization of perceived authenticity, a sophisticated mechanism that uses the appearance of openness to justify a life of relentless, isolating performance. The system doesn't reward honesty, it rewards clarity of persona, which is the very antithesis of the chaotic, contradictory truth of the self. This is the ultimate self-betrayal, turning the inner life into a perpetually edited broadcast, forfeiting the right to change, to fail privately, or to simply be complex. If you find this dissection of the modern psyche resonates with the uncomfortable truths you've been avoiding, and you want to continue dismantling these pervasive cultural lies, then take a moment now and subscribe. Don't let this necessary, difficult truth dissolve into the noise of algorithmically optimized distraction. Consider the motivational guru who sells vulnerability as a product. They are not truly vulnerable. They are sharing a meticulously processed version of past suffering, a trauma that has been safely resolved, sanitized, and packaged into a neat three-step action plan. The messiness, the ongoing struggle, the possibility of relapse, the deep and terrifying uncertainty of life outside the framework, that is ruthlessly edited out because it breaks the brand narrative of effortless success and predictable triumph. They have successfully commercialized their internal dialogue, but in doing so, they have forfeited their future right to be human. They become trapped in a golden cage of their own making, where their public identity forces them into a continuous state of emotional fraud. They are living proof that the deeper the commitment to performing a flawless existence, the emptier the real life must be to sustain the relentless upkeep. This pathology has filtered down from the celebrity sphere into the mundane reality of every social media user, turning mundane existence into a series of micro-performances. We are constantly checking the lighting, framing the shot, and adjusting the filter, not because we are trying to deceive others, but because we are engaged in the much more profound deception of convincing ourselves that the curated life is the only worthwhile life. The tragedy is that we are all starving, convinced that the perfectly plated, aesthetically pleasing plastic food we are serving each other is sustenance. We have mistaken the map for the territory, the optimized projection for genuine presence, and the result is a society suffering from mass psychological malnutrition. We must understand that this is not simply a matter of bad habits or technological distraction. This is a moral crisis rooted in a philosophical error. The idea that the human being is a machine capable of being perfected through self-optimization. When we treat the self as a project to be engineered, we inherently deny the intrinsic value of what already exists. The chaotic, irrational, unproductive parts of the soul, the parts that generate true art, true connection, and true meaning, are deemed defects and scheduled for removal. We have been taught to chase a state of unbothered perfection, a frictionless emotional existence that only exists in the sterile laboratory of the perfected persona. But true maturity is not the elimination of internal conflict. It is the willingness to hold and integrate contradictory truths, to be simultaneously successful and miserable, loved and lonely, confident and utterly terrified. The refusal to accept this chaotic duality is what drives the desperate need for external validation, the constant glancing toward the social mirror to verify that the performance is still convincing. This neurotic reliance on external affirmation is precisely what gives control over our inner landscape to the very forces we should be resisting. We allow the anonymous gaze of the crowd to dictate the shape of our sorrow and the texture of our joy. And this brings us to the greatest lie of the contemporary digital age, the myth of compulsory authenticity. We are constantly exhorted to just be yourself, yet what we are really being asked to do is produce a perfectly branded, easily digestible version of our flaws. Authenticity, in this context, is not the messy, contradictory reality of the soul. It is merely the newest, most optimized filter for the eternal performance. Vulnerability is no longer a spontaneous consequence of intimacy, but a calculated form of social capital, a strategic disclosure designed to maximize engagement. We have learned to monetize our sadness, to package our trauma into easily shareable narratives, transforming genuine existential angst into aesthetic suffering that is stylized, consumable, and safely divorced from the actual, ugly reality of pain. When you treat your deepest conflicts as content, you strip them of their power to instruct and purify the soul, turning the journey towards self-understanding into a shallow pitch meeting. The moment you start checking the metrics on your supposed authenticity, the likes received on a post about your depression, the comments validating your self-care routine, you have already severed the connection to the genuine article. This is the ultimate self-betrayal, reducing the sacred, turbulent process of being human to an algorithm of microtransactions. This deep analysis requires that we look far past the surface noise of cultural trends and truly examine the underlying psychological machinery that governs modern existence. If you value diving this deep into the actual stakes, if you believe that the truth requires excavation, not just scrolling, then make sure you subscribe right now. Supporting channels that refuse to simplify the terrifying complexity of the human condition is the only way this depth remains viable. The true problem with this weaponized authenticity is that it prevents genuine self-knowledge. If we are always anticipating the audience's reaction, we never get the quiet, necessary time required for genuine introspection. We never learn the difference between the fear that is genuinely instructive and the anxiety that is merely manufactured by the expectations of the crowd. We confuse self-expression with self-discovery. Expressing a thought publicly does not mean you have processed it privately. More often, it is a substitute for that hard, lonely work. We have fallen into the habit of outsourcing our identity construction, allowing the aggregated feedback of anonymous others to define the boundaries of our inner world. We believe we are building a self, but we are merely constructing a highly responsive echo chamber, perfectly calibrated to reflect back the most pleasing image of our anxieties. And as the echo chamber grows louder, the quiet, insistent voice of actual conscience, the voice that reminds you of who you truly are when the performance lights are off, begins to fade entirely. The reason this fading happens is simple. The self, stripped of genuine ontological security, demands witnesses. We suffer from a profound modern terror, the fear that if our pain is not seen, cataloged and validated by the collective, it might not exist at all, or worse, that it might be meaningless. True meaning is generated through friction with reality and the silent integration of hardship. Synthetic meaning is purchased instantly through the public confirmation of distress. This transaction is the engine of our suffering. We do not share our wounds to heal them. We share them to stabilize a shaky ego. When the wound becomes a central pillar of your social identity, the thing that grants you status, attention, and belonging, you are actively discouraged at a subconscious level from ever fully closing it. The economy of attention requires a constant supply of raw emotional material. If you genuinely find peace, you risk becoming irrelevant. You risk having nothing left to sell. We have created a psychic marketplace where trauma is the most valuable commodity. And like all commodities, its value inflates, forcing performers to continually escalate their vulnerability, searching for newer, deeper, more shocking confessions to recapture the fleeting attention of a desensitized audience. The quiet work of sitting with your own unresolved ugliness, the uncomfortable realization that your flaws are boringly common and not specially tragic, is rejected outright because it offers no viral potential. The performance demands maximum specialness. This is the tragic paradox. We chase authenticity by maximizing dramatic effect, which is the definition of artificiality. We become masters of self-curation, carefully staging our imperfections to achieve perfection in the eyes of the digital crowd. We are sacrificing our true, messy, incoherent inner life on the altar of public acceptability. This pressure creates a unique form of psychological dissociation. We become so adept at portraying the version of ourselves we believe the world wants to see, the relatable, struggling, but ultimately resilient protagonist, that we lose the capacity to recognize the actual person underneath. We look in the mirror and see not a self, but a highly successful character profile. The self-help industrial complex reinforces this cycle by demanding that we constantly perform a state of perpetual self-optimization, ensuring we never simply are but are always becoming a better, more marketable version. The true horror is that even the act of resting, of pausing the performance, now feels like a moral failure. If you find this analysis uncomfortable, good. It means you are still willing to look at the ugly truth of our shared psychological landscape, rather than merely consuming the comfortable narratives. If you want this channel to continue delivering content that resists the easy lie and digs into the complexity of the human condition, then please subscribe now and help us build a space for this kind of rigorous, necessary thought. The system is designed to reward the shallow and silence the deep, and only dedicated support can counter that gravity. This cultural mandate to display suffering is not empathetic. It is fundamentally narcissistic, both for the performer and the audience. The audience consumes the trauma not for the benefit of the sufferer, but for the validation of their own sensitivity, or to gain a temporary, manufactured sense of moral superiority that comes from bearing witness to someone else's struggle. This creates a parasitic feedback loop where pain is leveraged for status, and the genuine requirement for solitude and processing is replaced by the relentless, demanding glare of the digital spotlight. We have traded the hard-won, private piece of wisdom for the brittle, temporary high of being seen. The final result of this weaponized authenticity is not liberation, but a deeper, more sophisticated form of self-imprisonment. We are trapped in a self-made panopticon, constantly adjusting our inner state based on the perceived gaze of the global crowd, ensuring that the performance never breaks and that the audience never leaves. The only freedom left is the terrifying option to log off, to shut down the feedback mechanism, and to finally sit in the uncomfortable, silent presence of the self you have spent years trying to edit for public consumption. This is the moment when real philosophy begins. The only freedom left is the terrifying option to log off, to shut down the feedback mechanism, and to finally sit in the uncomfortable, silent presence of the self you have spent years trying to edit for public consumption. This is the moment when real philosophy begins. The verdict is this: if you want to reclaim your mind, you must abandon the metric of visibility entirely. True integrity cannot be measured in likes, shares, or views. The price of admission to the world of genuine selfhood is the willingness to be utterly unseen, to accept that your most profound struggles and your hard-won epiphanies will be hidden, irrelevant to the algorithm, and therefore invisible to the crowd. We have been conditioned to believe that if a thought isn't monetized or public-facing, it has no value. This is the central lie of the digital age. The most valuable, potent, and transformative parts of you are those you refuse to commodify. They are the secrets you keep not out of shame, but out of necessity, to protect their purity from the corrosive effects of the crowd's appraisal. The system is indifferent to your happiness and hostile to your depth. It only cares about your attention and your performance data. Therefore, the only winning move is to take your attention back and redirect it inward, away from the demanding, hungry gaze of the digital audience. We must realize that the profound is always quiet, and the noisy spectacle is almost always shallow. Your goal should not be to achieve perfect authenticity, which is just another brand trap, but to achieve impenetrable silence. The performance of self is exhausting because it is built on sand, a shifting foundation of approval. The real work is built in the dark, in the quiet discipline of simply knowing who you are without requiring a million witnesses to confirm it. Stop seeking permission to exist. Stop trying to justify your worth via engagement figures. The genuine self is the one you meet when all the cameras are off, when the feed is dead and the silence is deafening. That person, unedited and unmarketable, is the only one who is actually free. This fight for the interior life is the defining psychological challenge of our time, and the refusal to join the performance is the highest form of intellectual rebellion left. If this analysis resonates with the part of you that craves complexity and rejects the easy narratives of self-optimization, then join us. Subscribe now and become a member of the community committed to resisting the noise, valuing the unseen, and building the necessary silence required for real thought. The ultimate verdict is this: the fight for your attention is the fight for your sovereignty. You do not win this war by outperforming the spectacle. You win it by refusing to participate in the spectacle at all. Silence is not emptiness. It is the container for complexity, the necessary space where genuine belief is forged, unpolluted by the market's demands. It is the only true form of digital resistance. I would argue that your most important work is the work that will never be seen, never be liked, and never be shared. This is the work of maintaining the fortress of the mind. Do not mourn the attention you lose by being profound. Pity the people who cannot tolerate the stillness required to understand it. We have been lied to about what freedom looks like. Freedom is not the ability to express everything instantly. Freedom is the earned luxury of not having to express anything at all. It is the peace of knowing your worth exists entirely independent of any external witness. If this perspective speaks to the rebel within you, to the part that refuses to be just another node in the network, then make the commitment. Join the community now. We are the ones building the necessary silence. We are the ones keeping the deep end dark. The ultimate verdict is this: the fight for your attention is the fight for your sovereignty. You do not win this war by outperforming the spectacle. You win it by refusing to participate in the spectacle at all. Silence is not emptiness. It is the container for complexity, the necessary space where genuine belief is forged, unpolluted by the market's demands. It is the only true form of digital resistance. I would argue that your most important work is the work that will never be seen, never be liked, and never be shared. This is the work of maintaining the fortress of the mind. Do not mourn the attention you lose by being profound. Pity the people who cannot tolerate the stillness required to understand it. We have been lied to about what freedom looks like. Freedom is not the ability to express everything instantly. Freedom is the earned luxury of not having to express anything at all. It is the peace of knowing your worth exists entirely independent of any external witness. If this perspective speaks to the rebel within you, to the part that refuses to be just another node in the network, then make the commitment. Join the community now. We are the ones building the necessary silence. We are the ones keeping the deep end dark. The great lie of modernity is that self-expression equals self-worth. The ultimate truth is that self-worth is found in the things you actively choose not to share. Your sanity is determined by the size of your unmarketed life. The only successful negotiation with the spectacle is the permanent termination of the contract. You must burn the stage down, not for applause, but for the clarity of the ash. I pity those who mistake a trending topic for a genuine thought. They are professional shadows, perpetually defined by the light shining upon them. The truly free individual finds their identity in the absolute vacuum of observation. Their deepest joy is private, their hardest fought battle unwitnessed. That quiet sovereignty is the only prize worth pursuing. This is the cost of depth, being ignored by the shallow. If you understand that isolation is the precondition for insight, if you are ready to trade fleeting visibility for enduring substance, then make your final commitment. Subscribe. Join us and help maintain the necessary silence. We need more fortresses of the mind, and yours is waiting to be built. We will keep the deep end dark together. The final verdict is that true sovereignty demands absolute obscurity. Your life is not content. Your sanity is your only audience. Choose the peace of the fortress over the roar of the crowd. This is the only way to win. Subscribe and let the noise perish. We need more fortresses of the mind, and yours is waiting to be built. We will keep the deep end dark together. The final verdict is not negotiable. True sovereignty demands absolute obscurity. Your life is not content. It is not an asset to be monetized or a performance to be judged. Your sanity is your only audience. Choose the impenetrable peace of the fortress over the exhausting, temporary roar of the crowd. This is the only way to win the zero-sum game of attention. To truly possess yourself, you must disappear. Subscribe and let the noise perish.